She pulled a gun on me before she even asked my name. There I was, standing in my barn with a bucket of feed in one hand and a corncob pipe in the other, when she marched in like she was clearing a building in Fallujah. "You're trespassing on HOA property," she barked. I blinked once, set the bucket down gently, and said as calm as could be, "Ma'am, this is my ranch." That's when she raised the Glock and said the words that would kick off the most ridiculous war of my life. "Not anymore. Truth is, I moved out here to avoid this kind of drama. Retired sheriff, 30 years in the badge and boots, figured I earned a little peace. Built this ranch myself on 32 acres just outside the Hidden Pines development. My land's older than the HOA, older than the town line, older than Karen's fake blonde highlights. I bought this place when it was still nothing but rattlesnakes, sagebrush, and sunset. And for the last 2 years, peace is exactly what I had until she showed up. First time I met her, she wasn't carrying a gun. She had a clipboard, a Karen bob cut, and a face that looked like it got Botoxed by someone on a trampoline. She pulled up in a pearl-white Lexus, parked half in my ditch, got out like she was royalty arriving at a peasant's hut, and asked me, "Is this your barn?" I said yes. She squinted at me like I'd just confessed to arson. It doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Now, I didn't say what I wanted to say. I didn't mention that my nearest neighbor was half a mile off and her neighborhood was full of overpriced cookie-cutter houses designed by someone who'd never seen a tree. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, this is not your neighborhood." She didn't like that. Within a week, I got a letter, folded in half and duct-taped to my mailbox, which is a federal offense, by the way, telling me I was in violation of several HOA bylaws. Improper fencing material, illegal livestock density, unregistered poultry. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. I mailed the letter back with a handwritten note. "I'm not in your HOA. Kindly shove it." That's when she escalated. First came the bogus animal control visit. Said someone reported neglected horses. I showed the agent my stable, cleaner than most people's kitchens. He apologized and left. Then came the zoning complaint. Said my barn was an unauthorized structure. I'd had it for over 15 years, fully permitted, county inspected twice. She even tried reporting me for excessive rural sounds. I guess roosters crowing offended her HOA ears. But none of that compared to what happened the night after she pulled that gun. See, after she aimed that weapon at me, I disarmed her with a move I hadn't used since 1998, grabbed her wrist, twisted, and zip-tied her with the emergency restraints I keep in the barn. She screamed bloody murder, threatened to sue me into the dirt, said she had powerful friends. I called the sheriff's department. Thought it'd be open and shut. But when the deputy showed up, my jaw nearly hit the dirt. It was Joey Martinez. Used to be my rookie. Now he was wearing 3 stripes and a badge that said sheriff. We shared a long glance. He looked at Karen, looked at me, and said, Can we talk inside?" 10 minutes later, Karen was untied, her gun was returned, and Joey whispered, "Just don't make this messy, Hank. Her husband's got pull. Real estate money." So she walked. She pulled a gun on me on my own land, and she walked. Next morning, my livestock fence was cut clean through. Horses scattered halfway to the ridge. Took me 6 hours and 3 sore muscles. I forgot I had to round them up. No note, no witnesses. But I knew. That was Karen's way of saying the fight had started. I figured she'd stay petty. More citations, maybe spray paint my barn or file another dozen fake complaints. But she changed tactics. She went quiet. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Not a peep. Even her Lexus stopped driving by. And let me tell you, that scared me more than the gun ever did. One morning, I found a surveyor's marker driven into my southern pasture. Fresh. Orange flag fluttering in the wind like a warning. I yanked it out and called the county office. They had no record of any zoning changes. But 2 days later, I got a cease and desist letter from a law firm in town. Said my ranch had been annexed into the Hidden Pines HOA under revised land use agreements. Said I'd signed off. Now, I've seen a lot of forgeries in my day, and this one was almost good. Almost. They even copied my signature from an old traffic citation. But they forgot one thing: I always cross the second F in sheriff when I sign anything official. Always. This signature didn't. I drove into town, slammed that letter on the law office desk, and demanded a meeting. The lawyer, some pencil-necked weasel named Chad, smiled like a possum. Said I'd have to take it up with the HOA board. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just annoying. She wasn't just power-tripping. She was trying to take my land. Legally. Quietly. And if I didn't stop her, she might succeed. I installed cameras. Every angle of the property. Wired to my phone. First night, nothing. Second night, a coyote. Third night, I caught a guy, maybe 20, hoodie, mask, tampering with my water pump near the chicken coop. I scared him off with a warning shot into the dirt. He dropped a crowbar and ran like the devil himself was on his heels. Karen reported me for firing a weapon. Next thing I know, I get a knock on the door from Joey again, holding a complaint. He didn't look me in the eye this time. She was trying to bury me in paperwork, weaponize the system, force me into selling or complying. But she didn't know what I know. She didn't know that I built this ranch with my own 2 hands after I buried my wife, and retired because I couldn't take one more second of crooked politics and backdoor favors. She didn't know this land is the only thing that kept me sane. That I had no kids, no family, just this dirt and sky and the ghosts that came with both. And she sure as hell didn't know I used to put people like her in cuffs before breakfast. So I poured myself a drink, sat on my porch, and watched the sun set behind my barn. War was coming. She started it. But I was going to finish it. The second time she pulled a gun on me, she aimed it at my dog. It was just after sunset, and Duke, my old blue heeler, was trotting toward the barn like he did every evening when he heard something out of place. That dog's got better instincts than most men I ever trained, and I knew something was off the moment his ears perked. I followed a few paces behind with a flashlight and a revolver on my hip, not expecting much more than a raccoon in the grain bin. What I wasn't expecting was Karen, crouched behind a hay bale, gun in hand, and her eyes wide like she was the star of her own action movie. When Duke let out a low growl, she stepped out and pointed the weapon right between his eyes. I reacted faster than thought. Old habits. I grabbed her wrist, twisted the gun away, and pinned her against the barn wall. She screamed, not from pain but indignation, like I'd just insulted her salad at brunch. Duke stood by, teeth bared, but didn't move. He knew I had it handled. "What the hell are you doing on my land?" I growled. She had the nerve to say she was inspecting for violations. I laughed, once hard and bitter. "You're not an inspector. You're trespassing. With a firearm." She spit back. "You're in HOA jurisdiction now." I was so stunned, I loosened my grip for half a second, and she shoved me backward, grabbed the gun, and ran off into the dark like a lunatic in yoga pants and pearls. I didn't sleep that night. I kept a chair on the porch, shotgun across my knees, and Duke curled at my feet. My land didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like enemy territory. I wasn't scared. I was mad. Mad that the world let people like her get power. Mad that no one seemed to care she was pushing around a man who'd spent 3 decades serving this county. But mostly I was mad at myself for letting it get this far. The next morning, I went to town to file a report. Not that I expected it to go anywhere. Joey met me at the front desk, his face tight and apologetic. "Hank," he said, "I believe you. I do. But unless she actually fires the thing or someone else sees her, there's not much we can do. Her husband's still got friends in the county office." I stared at him for a long time, then just said, "This is how it starts, Joey. Good men doing nothing." He didn't argue. He just turned and walked away. Back at the ranch, things got worse. A certified letter was waiting in my mailbox when I returned. This one was thicker, official-looking. Inside was a cease and desist, again, only this time it came with a threat of eminent domain. Said the Hidden Pines HOA had voted to acquire my land under expanded community development plans. Said I was uncooperative and unfit to manage property under their jurisdiction. Said my presence was destabilizing. The letter was signed by 5 board members. I only recognized 2 names. Karen's and someone named Doug Wendell, a guy who once got fined for building a patio without a permit and now walked around like he was a city planner. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a petty feud anymore. This was a coordinated effort to take what I had. And if they were willing to forge documents and pull guns, what else were they hiding? I decided to find out. I started with the HOA's public filings. It wasn't hard. I still had contacts in City Record. Took me half a day to dig through their meeting minutes and building permit. Something didn't smell right. They'd pushed through a zoning reclassification last month, but the signatures approving it didn't match the names I knew. I pulled the original documents and saw it. Someone had been falsifying vote, rubber stamping changes without proper authorization. And there was a lot of money moving around. Renovation funds, special assessment, developer incentives, all approved by the board. I dug deeper. Next came the bank statements. I had to be careful. Had to call in a favor from an old friend at the state auditor's office. He owed me one. 2 days later, he sent me a secure envelope with a sticky note that read, "You didn't get this from me." Inside were transaction logs, HOA dues going into shell companies, contracts awarded to firms with no employees, payments routed through a small LLC that listed its primary address as a UPS store P.O. box in Albuquerque. And whose name was on that LLC? Franklin Goldstein, Karen's husband. It all clicked into place. The HOA wasn't just being petty. It was a front, a financial funnel. Karen wasn't some power-hungry suburbanite. She was laundering money through her own neighborhood, using the rules to bully residents, then skimming off the top when they complied. That's why she wanted my land. More space, more development, more money. And I was in the way. I printed everything. Files, emails, logs, map. I made 3 copies and locked them in 3 different places. Then I sent an anonymous packet to the local paper. Didn't expect much. Most reporters wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole, not with the Goldsteins' influence. But I had to try. That night, I sat on the porch again, same shotgun across my knees. I knew she'd make a move. I was right. Just past midnight, a vehicle pulled up with its lights off. I recognized the shape. A Toyota Tacoma, older model, spray-painted flat black. I grabbed my binoculars. Saw 2 figures step out. Hoodies. One carried a gas can, the other a crowbar. They crept toward my barn. I let them get within 20 feet before I flipped the floodlight on and pumped a shell into the chamber. The sound was unmistakable. Both figures froze. "Next step is lead," I shouted. They bolted. I didn't chase. Just stood there, breathing heavy, while Duke barked bloody murder beside me. I called Joey in the morning. Told him everything. He came out personally. Looked at the boot prints, the half-spilled gasoline, the cut wire on the gate. Took pictures. Wrote a report. I asked him, "You gonna arrest someone this time?" He didn't answer. Just said, "Be careful, Hank." Karen had declared war. And if she thought I was going to roll over, she clearly forgot what kind of man I used to be. She thought a piece of paper, a petty board, and a crooked smile were enough to scare me off my land. She was dead wrong. She wasn't just poking the bear anymore. She'd walked into the den and slapped it across the face. The rain started around midnight. Not a soft drizzle or gentle patter, but a full-on deluge that turned the dirt into soup and made the gutters scream. I watched from the porch, listening to the storm pound the roof like it had a grudge. Duke lay curled beside me, tail twitching every time thunder cracked. The barn lights flickered once, then held steady. I should have gone inside. Instead, I poured another 2 fingers of bourbon and waited. Something was coming. You don't stand in the rain with a loaded shotgun unless you know in your gut the weather isn't your biggest problem. By dawn, the creek had overflowed. My southern pasture was a swamp. I was walking the fence line, checking for damage, when I spotted it. The earth along the far ridge had split clean open in a muddy slide, exposing a jagged hole beneath the roots of an old cottonwood. At first, I thought it was just a chunk of pipe or rock sticking out. But then I got closer and saw teeth. Human teeth. And a partial skull wedged between layers of red clay and black roots. I didn't touch it. Didn't go near. Just stood there, letting the rain soak into my boots, staring down at a ghost that wasn't mine. The sheriff's office arrived 2 hours later, after I made the call no retired lawman ever wants to make. Joey showed up in person again, raincoat soaked through, eyes wary. He taped off the area, took photos, made the right noises. But I could see the fear behind his eyes. Not of the body. Of what it meant. They took the remains to the coroner, and I went home to change. An hour later, I got a call from an old contact at the morgue. The body wasn't fresh. Not by a long shot. Male. Mid-30s. Been in the ground at least 20 years. Dental records matched someone named Samuel Ruiz. I remembered the name. He was an informant. A small-time hustler who turned on a big-time operation back when I was still chasing meth labs and backroom dealers. He disappeared in 2003, just before he was supposed to testify. No leads. No body. Until now. I sat with that news for a while. It settled over me like a wet coat. Samuel Ruiz hadn't run. He'd been buried. Right next to my property. Which meant someone put him there. And whoever it was had to know these hills. Had to know the old ranch lines, the access roads, the way to get in and out without being seen. I started going through my old case files, digging through memories I'd boxed up and shoved into the attic of my mind. And that's when I found it. A list of known associates tied to the drug ring Ruiz had turned on. One name popped out, Franklin Goldstein. Back then, he went by Frank Garrison. Low-level enforcer, slick talker, small-time muscle with big ambitions. Disappeared after the ring was busted. No trial. No plea deal. Just vanished. At the time, we figured he skipped town. Changed his name. Maybe ran to Mexico. But he hadn't. He'd stayed right here. Built a new life. Married a woman named Karen. Bought land. Started a real estate business. Became a respectable man. The kind of man who hides his dirt behind homeowners associations and fundraising dinners. I drove to town that afternoon, parked 2 blocks from the Hidden Pines HOA office, and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 3:30, Franklin walked out the front door. Khakis, blue blazer, Bluetooth in one ear. He looked like any other suburban snake oil salesman. But I knew better. I followed him to a coffee shop, kept my distance, and snapped a few pictures when he met with 2 other men I recognized from old surveillance logs. One of them was a money launderer. The other used to run guns out of Arizona. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was confirmation. Franklin hadn't left the life. He'd just upgraded it. The next town meeting was a circus. Karen was at the head of the table, wearing a power blazer and that smug smile like she'd already won. She started droning on about fencing violations and community beautification project. I waited until she opened the floor for questions. Then I stood up and handed a folder to the man beside me. Local reporter. I'd made sure he was there. Made sure he had copies of everything. Embezzlement reports, false permits, LLC records, the real estate fraud, the shell companies, and Franklin's old identity. Karen tried to talk over me. Tried to call me a liar, a bitter old man. But I just raised my voice and told the room about the body in the ravine. About how that man had been set to testify against the very criminal enterprise Franklin once worked for. How Karen had knowingly married into it. How their entire HOA scheme was a cover for laundering old money and silencing anyone who got in the way. Someone screamed. Another stood up and shouted. A man stormed out, Franklin. He pushed past people like they were paper, barked into his phone, and disappeared into his car. I didn't follow. I knew where he was going. Knew he'd try to clean up the mess. That's what guilty men do. I tailed him later that night. Kept my lights off and my engine quiet. He drove north, past the city line, out toward the industrial flats where no one asked questions. He met someone there. Big guy. Tattoos. They talked for a while, and then Franklin handed him a manila envelope. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need to. It was a hit. That much was obvious. He was trying to cover tracks, tie off loose ends. I made a call. The man Franklin wanted dead was still alive. Barely. He'd been hiding out in a halfway house 2 counties over, scared of coming forward. I'd found him through a mutual friend. Told him the truth. Promised I'd protect him. That night, I drove straight to the shelter, got him out, and brought him to a safe spot on my ranch. He recognized Franklin's picture instantly. Said he'd seen him the night Ruiz disappeared. Said Franklin had threatened them both. Said Karen was there, too. I recorded every word. The barn burned the next night. I knew it was coming. Had pulled the horses out earlier in the day. But watching it go up still tore something loose inside me. Years of work, gone in flames. Tools, feed, a tractor I rebuilt by hand. All of it. Ash in the wind. And on the gravel near the back wall, I found the gas can. Still warm. No fingerprints. Just a single pink glove, the kind Karen always wore when she gardened. I didn't call the fire department. Didn't call Joey. Just stood there until the sun came up and the smoke turned gold in the morning light. Then I walked back to the house, loaded my truck with everything I had left, and got ready. They'd tried to burn me out. They'd buried bodies and truth. But they forgot something important. I don't scare easy. And I don't lose. The sun rose over scorched earth and smoldering timber, casting long shadows across what used to be my barn. I stood there, coffee in hand, watching smoke drift off the blackened beams like ghosts reluctant to leave. Duke sat beside me, silent for once, ears forward, as if even he knew something was coming. Not the storm this time. Not some legal letter or surprise permit or anonymous complaint. This was bigger. This was the final play, and it was mine. I spent the day setting the trap. Not with wire or nails or anything you'd find in a hardware store. No, I used leverage. I used truth. I used fear. Everything they'd tried to keep buried, I dug up and strung together like barbed wire, sharp and impossible to ignore. The statements from the witness they tried to silence. The financial records I'd traced to that shady LLC. The old photos of Franklin in places he swore he'd never been. And the cherry on top, the recorded confession from the man hiding on my land, finally ready to tell the truth after 20 years of silence. He named names, described locations, even remembered the way Franklin laughed when they pushed Samuel Ruiz into that shallow grave, thinking the mudslide would cover the evidence forever. I called the local paper again. This time, they answered on the first ring. Seems someone on their board got a hold of the last folder I dropped. I gave them everything. Told them to run it all. Told them to name names. They hesitated for a second. Said it was dangerous. I told them it was already past that point. By the time I hung up, I knew the story would be out by morning. But I wasn't done. That evening, I parked my truck outside the town hall, right before the HOA's emergency meeting. Word had gotten around. Half the neighborhood was there already, standing in clumps, murmuring and side-eyeing each other like they'd just found out their neighbor was on a watch list. Karen stood by the podium, back straight, voice clipped, trying to maintain control. She called it all fake news. Said it was a smear campaign by a disgruntled ex-cop with a vendetta. That's when I walked in. The room got quiet the second the door shut behind me. I didn't speak at first. Just dropped a thick manila folder on the table and looked straight at Karen. "Read it," I said. She didn't. Just stared at me with that stretched face of hers, all denial and desperation, until one of the board members, Doug, the former patio criminal turned lapdog, opened the folder and started flipping through. His face drained of color fast. Then he looked at Karen and asked, "Is this real?" She didn't answer. That's when Franklin walked in. He was late, probably hoping to avoid the mess. He saw me and stopped in the doorway. I didn't flinch. Just looked him dead in the eye and said, "We need to talk." He turned to walk away, but I was already on him. Grabbed his arm, spun him around, and before he could make a move, a set of headlights lit up the room from outside. 2 black Suburbans rolled up in front of the town hall. Federal plates. FBI jackets stepped out, calm and coordinated. They'd been waiting for my call. I'd sent them everything the night before, just in case the paper got cold feet. They arrested Franklin on the spot. Money laundering. Fraud. Conspiracy. There was more to come, and he knew it. Karen backed into a corner, pleading, saying she didn't know. That she was just a housewife. That Franklin had done it all behind her back. But the room didn't buy it. Not when I played the recording. Her voice, clear as day, talking about silencing the witness. About taking care of me and my land. She tried to run. Made it to the parking lot before one of the agents stopped her. Hand on her shoulder, calm as Sunday church. She went down screaming, hair wild, heels snapping on the pavement like gunshots. It should have felt like a victory, but all I felt was tired. Tired and hollow and worn thin from carrying this fight for so long. But I wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, it all came crashing down. The HOA dissolved almost overnight. Residents found out they'd been overcharged, underinformed, and outright lied to. Franklin and Karen's assets were frozen. Half the neighborhood sued the other half. The town council opened an ethics investigation into several officials who'd looked the other way. And Joey? He showed up at my door with a 6-pack and an apology. "I should have done more," he said, eyes down. "You did what you could," I replied, and I meant it. Not everyone's built to fight the wolves. But I am. I rebuilt the barn myself. Took longer than it should have. My hands don't work like they used to, and my knees complain about every ladder. But there was something healing in it. Each nail I drove, each beam I raised, was another piece of peace I'd taken back. Duke supervised, of course. Never strayed more than 10 feet from me. I reckon he earned a badge of his own after all this. The chickens came back first. Then the horses. The pasture dried out, and the cottonwood by the ridge stood tall again, as if defying the ghosts beneath it. I planted a tree beside it, nothing fancy, just a small oak. For Samuel Ruiz. For truth, buried too long. For all the men who never got justice. People started waving at me again. Stopping to talk. Offering help. Funny how quick a town turns when the truth's finally louder than the rumors. One day, a little girl from down the road came by with a drawing. It was a stick figure in a cowboy hat, standing in front of a barn with flames behind it. At the top she wrote, "Sheriff Hank saves the day." I pinned it on the fridge. Might be the only award that's ever made me tear up. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet I earned. The kind of quiet that hums instead of presses. I sit on the porch most evenings, watching the sun set behind the barn, same as always. But now I know it's mine. Not just by deed or law or fence line. But because I fought for it. Because I bled for it. Because no matter how many Karens or Franklins come crawling out of their gated communities with clipboards and concealed weapons, they'll never understand what it means to love a piece of land so much you'd go to war for it. They tried to take that from me. And now they're the ones behind fences. And mine still opens with a smile.